Hi, and welcome to ACT 2018 Science Test. This is passage number 6. So here we go. In this passage, they're looking at... Is this going to move on me? There we go. Sorry, it wasn't moving there for a second. We're looking at a box that has some sand and some ice and some wind. And so you can look at study number 1 is all of this plus this graph, and then study number 2 is this bottom part down here. Okay, so let's look at study number 1. I'm going to ignore this top part because it really is not that important. Step number 1, or study number 1. So in study number 1, there is some sand, and it's about 30 centimeters deep. There is 30 centimeters of ice. There is a fan that is turned on, and it happens for 600 minutes, and they are catching the runoff, the melting of the ice. And then there are 4 trials. The first trials, there are wind speeds of that, and the fourth trial, there is no fan. So that's what's happening. So when you look at this chart, you can see here are the wind speeds, here's the time, here's the measuring of the volume of the runoff. Study number 2, they're looking at the same thing was kind of repeated, but again, this time step number 1 was omitted. So what's step number 1? There is no sand. And then the result of the trial. And then they also have, here's your key right here. All right, so this is what we're going to be mostly interpreting as these graphs. So number 34, the researchers conducted the studies chose to use a box made out of plastic rather than wood to ensure that all the water from the melting ice would flow from the box and into the trough. The researchers most likely made that choice because of type of plastic, unlike wood is, and so hopefully you have enough kind of background knowledge about wood and plastic, but wood is going to absorb water and plastic is not. So we would want to look down here and think that wood is porous and permeable and therefore incapable of absorbing water. Well, that's not true because it is porous and it will absorb water. Plastic is non-porous and impermeable and therefore incapable of absorbing water. Well, I know that that is the correct answer, so I would stop reading right there. So the correct answer is G. Number 35. Suppose study 2 had been repeated. This is the one where they do not have sand and they have sand. Except for in the lab, it's kept at -1 degree Celsius. The total volume of runoff measured over the 600 minutes in the repeated study would most likely have been... Well, if you know that at 0 degrees Celsius, water freezes. And so if it's -1 degree Celsius, then there is not going to be any runoff because you're dealing with solid water. So then when you read your choices, what would have been the results near or at 0 for runoff because -1 degree Celsius is below the freezing point of water? That is the correct answer. You're welcome to keep reading the rest of the choices, but once you find the correct answer, you really should want to stop. Don't keep second guessing yourself. Number 36. According to the results of study number 1, for which of the wind speeds did the runoff volume per 20 minutes decrease from zero from its maximum value before 500 minutes? So we're going to look for when did it drop down to 0 before 500 minutes. So we're going to be on this very first study. I'm going to clean this up a little bit again here so you can see what's going on. So we have, here's my 500, and we want to know which ones dropped off before 500. Well, I can see right here that this one went until 600 minutes and this one went to after 500 minutes. So then I can eliminate whatever those ones are, those particular symbols are. We know that we now are looking at this one dropped off before and this one dropped off before. So now let's go back and look at the answer choices that we have, and we know that the answer choices was 1 and 2.5. So this right here, J, is your correct answer for that one because they runoff occurred before 500 minutes. Number 37. Compare the results of the 2 trials in study 2. So we're looking at study 2. This is the one with sand and without sand. In which trial did the volume of runoff per 20 minutes reach a greater maximum value? So when did it have a greater volume of runoff? And in which trial did the volume of runoff per 20 minutes decrease to 0 from maximum in the shortest amount of time? So we're looking at the fastest runoff in the shortest amount of time. So when you look at this particular chart, you can start to see some kind of patterns here. This one had the greatest, and you have your Q, here is without sand. So without sand had the greatest rapid change. It went the quickest and it ran off the fastest, and it went much quicker than the one without. So this is without sand and without sand. They had the greatest maximum and the shortest amount of time. So the correct answer is D. All right, let's clean this up again. All right, so number 38. 38, the volume of runoff measured at 200 minutes, so we're looking at two things, 200 minutes in study 1, for the 4 wind speeds is which represented by the following graph. So this one's a little bit weird, but we're going to figure this one out. So 200 minutes, study 1. So we're going to look at 200 minutes, and we're looking at study number 1, and we're going to see what happened for this graph. And so again, it's really hard to write with these pens, but I'm just going to go right up this line here, and I'm going to look and see. This one right here is 2.5. This one is the wind speed 2.5, and it has the lowest value. So when I look over here, I see that this is the lowest value, and compared to these other ones, so I'm going to start to eliminate because it was particularly right there. So now I'm going to look at the next one. What's the next? That's the square. So the square is 0, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, it's 0. And so then I'm going to go to the 0. And so now this one is lower than that one. So I'm going to start to kind of think that this might be it. But let's just double check. And then when you look right here, you'll notice that these two are at the exact same time or volume of runoff. And so I know that these two are the same. And so I know that the correct answer is J. So basically you're just interpreting the line graphs and figuring out how would you plot those points as a bar graph. And then 39, which factor was varied in study 1 but kept the same in study 2? And so the only thing that was changed really in study 1 was right down here. It talked about the wind speed. There was 3 wind speeds and then no wind speed. And so right off the bat we can just go straight to the correct answer as being B. And then finally, 40, based on the diagram and the description of study 1, so study 1 again, which of the following expressions would most likely be used to calculate the volume of the sand layer in the plastic box before chipped ice was placed on top? And so when we start to think about this particular problem, we have these variables over here, and so we have this value, and this value. But then it talks about how we have, what would be the volume of the sand? Oh, then the other thing that you have to take into account, this is what I remember about this problem, is that there is 30 centimeters of sand in the box. So right here, there is sand in this area, and it's 30. So I'm going to have to change this number to 30 because they want to know the volume from the top to the sand. So these are the numbers that I'm going to look at. And so when you come down here, I found that this is not correct. F is not correct. G is correct. That is the correct answer because there is the one with the sand, the width, and then the length. So this one is the correct answer, which is G. So there are the answers for passage number 6, and I hope that's been helpful.